Hi, I'm Glenn Gilmore. I'm an educator and VMware ambassador, and I have the privilege of having with us today Richard Munro, who's going to help us understand the topic of generative AI, responsible AI, and private AI. VMware has said that multi-cloud and generative AI are going to drive the next wave of business innovation, and I'm hoping that Richard can help us understand what that means and what that will look like. Richard, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey Glenn, great to be here with you. Yeah, Richard Munro. I work in VMware's Office of the CTO, which includes involvement in VMware AI labs. And look, put simply, I sit at the intersection between new technology trends, between the solutions that we have today and those that we're developing. So what works today, what comes next, but also working directly with customers and partners to actually understand what their reality is, because we don't like ivory tower syndrome. So we want to be making sure that whatever we're building, whatever we're bringing to our customers and partners is definitely something that's meeting their needs in a fully rounded set of ways, something that they can easily adopt. That's kind of key to that's like a mantra for us in developing things.
And Richard, right now, enterprise everywhere is talking about, thinking about generative AI and how to use it for enterprise. Can you help us understand what generative AI is in comparison to artificial intelligence, generally the traditional artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, the umbrella is artificial intelligence, right? But the generative AI is a bit different from traditional approaches of artificial intelligence, because traditionally, you would be looking at things like pattern recognition and that kind of thing in the machine learning spectrum. So, looking through millions of transactions for fraudulent activity, that kind of thing. And actually, that's been going on with lots of customers for many years. People are very, very good at it. If you think about that, though, there's a lot of skill and complexity involved in designing how you're going to execute that kind of machine learning AI capability. And then you need a lot of skill, work, and expertise in turning whatever it learns into something that you can understand or that you can act on. Generative AI, has really shone in the last, probably even less than 12 months, really. ChatGPT obviously was a huge moment. And effectively what generative AI does is at the forefront of that. It makes the ability to kind of execute artificial intelligence processes really, really easy, right? We can all do it. We can all type English or our local language into a ChatGPT or something, and we're off. We're analyzing data based on the specifications that we just defined in a few sentences. And then generative AI gets the core of its name because not only can we trigger those processes, but then at the end we can have something created that meets our needs. Maybe that's a text document, maybe that's some video, right? Maybe it's some code or something like that. But we can actually go all the way through with this tremendously simplified ability for anyone to be able to now access huge amounts of data, to query it for things that they want to understand, and then to make it produce an output based on what it learned. So that's where generative AI is so super exciting.
And I guess it helps us understand when VMware says it's going to drive the next wave of innovation, because it's giving access to AI to everyone in the enterprise. That it's kind of this moment of democratization of artificial intelligence, so that it's empowering people who aren't necessarily technologists to innovate using artificial intelligence. And I guess that leads to another pillar of VMware's emphasis when it comes to AI and generative AI is a cautionary note of making sure that the AI we use is responsible AI. Can you help us understand what that term responsible AI means?
Yeah, I mean, touching on the point you just made, it is incredibly exciting. We can kind of pattern match, waves of innovation in applications that we all interface with, right? From the very early days, where it was highly skilled, connecting into mainframes, you really had to know what you're doing. You needed training to do the basic things. Then we all kind of learned the PC architecture, x86, and that meant that as long as we knew how to use a PC, we could do a bunch of different apps, right? And then the internet era, meant that, well, as long as we could use a browser, we could access a lot of different apps. The era of the iPhone, right, mobile apps, then it meant any of us could just, on our phones, we can use all sorts of different apps, but we're still constrained by somebody has to create those apps for us. Cloud is the back end to that mobile era. So somebody still has to create those apps for us. And we're still dependent on the application being something that we can interface well with, that's doing what we want it to do. The promise of Gen AI is that not only the ability for you to consume applications in much easier ways, much better interfaces for all your applications, it's your language, right? But also, you're right, everyone now has the power to basically program an application. Maybe a very small, narrow scoped one, but anyone can now be effectively a programmer, a builder of some kind of application outcome. And that's hugely exciting. That's why this is legit. This is big. This is going to be a wave unlike any that we've seen before. Now, while it's fun for all of us to have a play around on ChatGPT, to make some pictures on Stable Diffusion or things like that, these consumerized services, those things are telling us the promise of what generative AI can do for us. I have an idea, I can execute, right? But if you think about then how do I do that as an organization? What it's letting you do is take advantage of your data in ways that we've never been able to do before, right? It's always been really complex and difficult to get that value out of your data goldmine. You've had a handheld pickaxe, right? And then you need loads and loads of people to tap away until you extract a little nugget of gold. Generative AI is now a mining rig, right? And you can really get that value of your data. But that's the rub. That's your data. And if you want it to be your value, you need to protect it. Otherwise, somebody else can just come and do the same thing. And, so those risks of your data not being yours anymore, of exposing it to be shared with everyone, right? That's your value that is at risk of being exposed. But we also have to look at what we're seeing already in generative AI services. So, I had some fun creating some imagery, and I had a good, actually, professional purpose behind it, but I was using an AI service, and I was staggered. Even though I know it's a problem, I was staggered by the level of bias, and it was offensive. Right, they're seeing the level of bias.
Well, this is really critical for enterprise to understand. Although we have this democratization of people having access, workers having access to artificial intelligence to innovate, to do great things, you just cited a real world example where you're putting together a graphic for a business purpose, and what came back was offensive and biased.
Right.
It reflected bias. Can you help us understand how it is that VMware is suggesting a framework to make sure that it's responsible AI, so that we lessen the likelihood of that sort of thing happening?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is we refer to it as responsible AI. We have an AI code of ethics, and within VMware organizationally, we have a VMware AI Council. So we take very
that's a governance team. That would be, we'd recognize that as a governance team which looks at issues of bias and inclusion and transparency and accuracy. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so we decided as an organization. So when we keep a track on these technologies, this is what we do. Now, as we decided, well, how would we take advantage of this? We started hitting all these problems, right? About Okay, well, but how do we protect our IP? How do we not show, how do we not show bias? How do we be respectful of copyright? How do we, all these questions of privacy, of compliance, of regulatory needs, legal risk, IP risk, right? They're all there. So we set up a global AI council within VMware. And that's not just a techie thing. We have legal and compliance. We have our security CISO, Chief Security Officer, right? All the people that have a perspective on what VMware as a company should be doing, then began to have this really good introspection into, well, what's right to do, what's wrong to do, what problems do we need to solve? So that brought all the problems to the surface. And then we said, well, but we still want to use this technology, right? So how do we do it safely? So we started basically like every other company, right? We want to use this, we want the value, but we don't like these risks or these problems. So we just rethought, well, how can we leverage generative AI without restriction to get all the power of generative AI, but how can we do it in a way that's compliant with our business needs, with those things that we need to protect, and with our ethical values? We don't, maybe we don't get exposed by using someone else's copyright, but we care about that. We don't want to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the whole gamut of ethics and responsibility, we then, not only did we come up and air all those things that we need to think about, we then looked at, okay, well, how can we deploy these things within our own environments, so that we can protect against not having data sets that are heavily loaded with bias and copyright, etc., so that we can protect the integrity and privacy and regulatory compliance of our data sets. And that's what we built with the VMware private AI reference architecture. It's basically a model for how do you get this generative AI capability, but how do you deploy it and use it in a way that's conformant with the business needs you have to protect your data and your ethical responsibilities.
And if we look at the headlines, certainly that necessity of avoiding copyright infringements and avoiding privacy violations certainly go to the core of just the ethos of doing business correctly, but also go to risk mitigation for enterprises that want to seize the moment without losing in the process trust from their customers or putting others at harm in some way.
That's right, Glenn. And the feedback was immense and enormous, but beyond what we, even expected. So this is a problem that everyone wants to solve, but it also came with another advantage as well, because we were looking at the technologies, and this is a really fast-paced, innovative market, but it's an ecosystem. So we knew right up front that, look, there's areas where VMware as a technology company, there's areas where we can really bring a lot to this party, right? Where we can provide infrastructure that is highly efficient. Another responsible AI consideration, things like sustainability, right?
Sure.
So we can bring this private responsible infrastructure solution, but really the pace of change in the market, it's not one where you can afford to say, well, my AI is going to be with this vendor, or my AI is going to be with that vendor. You're going to have to you have to look at the ecosystem, because it's changing all the time. So there's a huge amount of really incredible partners, open source vendors out there that are driving the very latest in these capabilities. And we want to be able to take advantage of any of those things as they evolve. And we know our customers do too. Mm-hmm. So the fact that this reference architecture naturally lent itself to us building a framework for how you can have flexibility of choice across the entire ecosystem of which tools do I want to use for this specific use case.
You've touched on a final question that I had, which was kind of this third pillar of generative AI, which is how do you make it practical so that enterprises can actually use it? And you've given us the principle that it must be responsible, meaning that you've got to internally put in place structures that are going to provide that ethical compliance, that the scrutiny against bias. You've also noted that VMware's cloud infrastructure that gives you that cybersecurity and again that protection of the data that you'll be using. And then this additional point of a private AI, which seizes the moment of looking at data and leveraging data, but doing it in a way that it's kept more confidential and less at risk. Any other points on how to make that generative AI practical for business that you'd like to bring out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's essential. You mentioned early on that we see this closely interrelated with multi-cloud. So, this is a story about data at the end of the day, your ability to exploit your data and to do so safely. And if you think about where data sits across organizations, right, then you're going to need to bring that Gen AI compute, the training, the inferencing, you have to bring that to your data. So inherently, the Gen AI problem is the same as a multi-cloud problem. And this is one that we really well understand. So our goal is just to make the Gen AI piece just an easy layering on. We have really robust partnerships. We announced we've been working with NVIDIA for many years. They're obviously a big leader in the chip infrastructure and the software to do this in a stack model. But the delight actually for us, and let me just relay our own experience. So we partner with Hugging Face, and Hugging Face provide various models. What we're seeing is that the big generic services are fantastic for doing a wide variety of things. But if you want efficiency and you want to be able to kind of protect, etc., then when you really start looking at tailored models. So we partnered with Hugging Face on SafeCoder. Now, SafeCoder is a coding assistant. So your developers are working, and it will give them kind of coding suggestions and look for errors and things like that. And the Hugging Face model, it's actually pretty small. It's about 15 billion parameters, which for those in the know is pretty small. And we took that and we also further trained it on our own internal code base. And we gave that to our top developers, because your first use case is you should be looking at, how do I assist humans, right? How do I assist my best humans to do their jobs better? And we gave that to some of our top developers, and we had fantastic productivity improvements. Over 90% of them wanted to carry on using the tool. But the incredible thing that people maybe don't realize is it took us about half a day to train it, and we did the whole thing for over 100 developers. It's on one A100 GPU. Right. So people are probably thinking that, oh, how would I do this internally? That's going to be massively expensive. I'm going to need a huge team. It's about 4 people stood that up for us. Right. And now it's serving this incredible function for us. And because it's all scoped and deployed by us and we control the architecture, we know what data is in the model. A lot of those ethical considerations and the responsible considerations are much, much smaller, because we're in control of the whole end-to-end piece. So, another huge value of that private AI concept. So this is where, we're seeing the ideal starting point for use cases. Have that flexibility to pick a model and a solution that's right for the use case you want to test. Use it to assist someone with this, leveraging this reference architecture that we have. And you can learn a lot by doing that. And if you reduce the size of the problem down to something much more manageable, you'll learn a lot. We certainly found it cost way less than we ever thought, much less effort and time required than we thought to stand it up and to start getting dramatic results. So, that's really the advice. This is the way to learn, because we don't think anyone should be rushing into this and just going for that quick win and carrying on those risks. They're big risks, but you can do this stuff really easily. You can do it yourself. And the technology, both ours and in our ecosystem, is there to help you get started really quickly.
And Richard, you've emphasized the issue that really we're talking for most enterprise a multi-cloud ecosystem, and that you've got to bring the generative AI to the data, and that exposes an enterprise to a lot of risk unless they're partnering with a company that has deep experience in infrastructure that's safe and secure and understands multi-cloud. So I can see much better, thanks to our conversation here, of why it is VMware has such an important role to play in that next wave of business innovation because of its deep experience in multi-cloud. Any final thought for us?
No, I mean this is a super exciting time. I've enjoyed this chat, Glenn. You know, we could talk about this for hours, as you know.
I know that we're constrained by time, but I otherwise would continue on because I too have enjoyed our conversation. I thank you very, very much for your time. I know that you're traveling as well. Thank you so much for helping us understand better the pillars that are so important to leveraging generative AI for that next wave of business innovation. Thank you so much. Thank you.